Welcome to the third discussion in the policy series, which is curated by Mr. Pravesh Sharma. He has taken the lead role. Uh, the previous two discussions were also on very important subject of whether there should be legal guarantee for MSP and whether formal leasing should be encouraged and there should be a law to enable leasing of agricultural land. Today's discussion is the third in the series, and I am thankful to all the participants, especially Mr. Gokul Patnaik has come. Thank you, sir. Mr. Sanjay Kumar, uh, formerly with Indian Statistical Service, Mr. Sharma, Director General of Statistics, and Mr. Jakhar. Where is he? Mr. Jakhar has gone missing. He must be coming. And of course, the speakers who have found time for today's event. I'm sure that this very controversial subject will get your attention, not only the attention of those who are physically present here, but also the interest of those who are joining online. Actually, it is a highly disputed subject. Many people I meet still think that the withdrawal of the APMC bypass act has been some kind of disaster, while those who are really into this subject, like Dr. Mekhala, Krishnamurthy, know it very well that there are always two sides. We may have lost a little bit, but a lot of it has been saved by not permitting complete bypass of APMC. So, with this, I hand over to Mr. Pravesh Sharma.
Thank you, sir, and good evening, all. Welcome and thanks for your presence. Special thanks to our three distinguished speakers, Dr. Mekhala Krishnamurthy from Ashoka University, Dr. J.S. Yadav, a veteran of the agri-marketing space, currently the Secretary General of the Coalition of Council, I should say, Council of State Agricultural Marketing Boards. So we have the APMCs right here with us. And of course, Mr. Sachidanand Madan, NX-ITC senior leader, someone I may share who was present at the birth of the e-Chopal and saw its growth and later metamorphosis. So just a couple of words about what we are trying to achieve in these series of discussions. And the basic premise is that agriculture has always been the space where we saw the most forward-looking visionary ideas as far as policy was concerned. Beginning with the abolition of zamindari, then the entire green revolution set of policies, the policies around the white revolution, the milk revolution. In the 2000s, the whole technology revolution around BT cotton and hybrid maize. So what is surprising in the last 20 years is that we do not see any major breakthrough, long-term thinking or a large, shall we say, sector impacting idea emerge from the policy space. Of course, you have dozens of schemes, both in the UPA period and now in the last 10 years in this current government's period, but they don't add up to one big idea. So while, of course, the policy forums within the government, I'm sure, engage on these subjects, but since we, at least recently, do not have the tradition in the erstwhile planning commission, there would be regular issue of working papers, etc. For whatever reason, we seem to have discontinued that practice. But we thought that civil society should not give up its own role in generating ideas, in sharing them among stakeholders, and to the extent possible where they can be transmitted to government, we can do that also. So this is the background thought behind this series, and I think we are very fortunate that it has found great resonance. We have, of course, always a very interested audience present physically, but our online audience, and since ISC has been very kind as to put these entire recordings on their YouTube channel, I see that the number of views each time keeps going up. So obviously there is interest among the shall we say, policymakers also on what's happening in agriculture. So as Siraj Saab said, this is the third event of the series. We talked about the importance of MSP, a legal guarantee. We talked about land leasing the last time. And this time we thought we'll address the issue of agriculture markets. And each time we put the proposition as a sort of provocative question, right? The idea is simply to generate debate, not because we of course have some views, but we'll try and keep our own views to ourselves for the moment, because we have three very distinguished speakers. And I'm very privileged to invite Mekhala to be the first one. And if she'll permit me, of course, everyone knows about her professional achievements, but I'll, with her permission, share a personal anecdote. Mekhala did her PhD in Harda Mandi of Madhya Pradesh when I was the Agriculture Secretary of Madhya Pradesh, 2006-07, I think. And when I was told that here is this young lady, I think you were at Imperial College? UCL, University College London, and she wants to do her PhD in Harda Mandi. And I sort of recoiled. And I said, look, I know it's very well intentioned and all that, but I don't think that that's really something that will work out. But the person who was introducing her said, no, please meet her once. And Mekhala came to Bhopal and I met her. And I thought that, she's perhaps displaying something which you don't normally see in even people in government. So I said, okay, look, the department is against this idea completely, but I'll certainly let you go there for a month. But if in a month things don't work out, you'll have to go back. In the event, she stayed there for a full year, 18 months, and was very, very popular, and unearthed facts which we were not aware of, such as that there were cotton futures being traded in the 1860s in Harda Mandi, right? So her PhD is a very, very interesting document. Hopefully soon we'll read that in a book. And today she'll speak on the subject of should we have complete free markets in agriculture. You'll have 20 minutes. I'll give you a sort of hint around 15, so you know that you have 5 minutes too. Over to Mekhala.
Thank you so much. It is a huge privilege and pleasure to be here today. I think Mr. Sharma has already mentioned, I think with both the chair and the moderator today, it's just for me a huge honor. I think about 18 months into that Harda Mandi fieldwork, one farmer asked the other farmer, "Abhi tak hai yahan?" So he said, "Chori lambi fasal le rahi hai." So it has turned out to be indeed a very long fasal that I have taken. Harda, of course, moved from lambi fasal of cotton to short duration soybean and wheat. So that farmer said few people have the patience anymore. Also, lambi fasals means you have a lot more debt. And that's another challenge of long crops. But another farmer, and that's more to the point about the controversy, another farmer asked on the platform to another one, "Kya kar rahi hai?" And I overheard this farmer say, "Wo Mekhala, Mandi Mahabharat likh rahi hai." And that was also a very accurate description. If anybody has spent time in a prangan or market yard, in the mandi yard, it is in fact a place where the epic and the everyday collide on a very regular basis, where fortunes are made and floundered, and the stakes really could not be higher for anybody who is present there. And I think for those of us who work on markets and work on agriculture, it is a deep sort of source of some pain that the details are sometimes so cavalierly missed when the stakes are so high for these kinds of institutions. I also, want to thank the both of you for putting together this series on big ideas. Because, it's a very interesting and provocative title. You said it's a free market for agri-produce, the next big idea in agriculture. I put in brackets, of course, agriculture in and for India, and not just agriculture altogether. But I don't know if you thought about this when you did the scheduling, but this is the week 3 years ago. Guru Purab is around the corner. It's in the 15th. That the farm laws were repealed. So many people would say, forget next big idea. It was the last big idea 3 years ago repealed. And so it's for us to ask, the last or the next? Or is it just as it always is in the middle? So I want to make a few thoughts, maybe just step back a little bit and then move more to our current context. But the first is that the free market in agriculture has always been an idea. It has actually never been a reality. It is just an idea. I say just with some trepidation, because it's not just an idea, it is just a very big idea. So big ideas have a way, even when they're never fully implemented or can never be fully implemented, of taking root and doing something interesting with the world, even when they are never fully realized. This is one of those ideas that I don't think will ever be fully realized or can ever be fully realized. Some might say should ever be fully realized, but it is an idea nonetheless, right? And it's always been an idea. This last week, I've been reading a book by a historian called Jacob Soul, and it's called The Free Market, The History of an Idea, right? It's a very interesting book. It was published in 2022. Some of you will find it quite interesting. And in that, he actually spends a lot of time on agriculture. It's focused on Western thought. So it goes back 2,000 years. If it was focused on Indian civilizational thought, it would probably go back further. But he begins with Cicero, right? And he spends quite a lot of time thinking about Adam Smith. And one of the things you realize is that it's a very old idea. So it's one big idea, an idea, it's a big idea, it's also a very old idea. And in the imagination of the free market, usually in economics textbooks, things are called widgets. I don't know if any of you study economics, but Americans love to use this word widgets to talk about things. And there's demand and supply and models, and that's what this free market looks like. But actually, at the root of the idea of the free market, from Cicero onward, and certainly for Adam Smith, was agriculture, right? For both Cicero and Smith, the free market was actually about the negotiation between nature, markets and wealth creation, and the state, right? It was always been this tussle between these elements. And very few people know this, but Adam Smith, who we think about Invisible Hand, etc., he was what was called a physiocrat. He actually believed deeply in agriculture over industry. So he actually wanted to liberalize agriculture and believed that land-owning agriculturalists should control government, almost in a sort of oligarchic way, believed in land owning, and he believed industry should be secondary to agriculture, and that all wealth is actually agrarian wealth, right? This is Adam Smith. We've conveniently forgotten this part of Smith over many, many iterations. But much more important to him than the invisible hand, which was mentioned only once, was this idea of agriculture as the source of all wealth, right? So there's an old story there. But also when you actually read this kind of history of ideas, you realize it was full of contradictions, right? So Adam Smith actually believed deeply in agricultural liberalization. He also believed in protection. So he wanted internal freedoms, but he actually had a vision for the UK being protected, right? Britain protecting its interests. So he was like Mr. Trump today talks about protectionism and there's free market. This idea of protectionism was always there. He was also somebody who actually had no problem with slavery at the time. So he was kind of pro-slavery in certain ways, also pro-empire, right? But also believed in this free agrarian agriculture as the engine. And so what you see is that there were lots of blind spots in this long history. When you come to Milton Friedman, right, again, seen so much as the father of thinking about free markets and libertarianism, he came out an American Jew. He came out of a period in the in Europe and the United States where there had been war, and he was terrified, as many were, of the state, of state power. So Smith actually had very little faith in companies. See, he didn't like merchants. He didn't like mercantile capitalism. So mercantilism was not a good thing for him. For Milton Friedman, he didn't like the state. The real threat was the state, right? But what is really striking is that at all points, in all debates on what the free market could be, with all its blind spots, people are always talking about morality, and they're always talking about the common good or the greater good, right? Free markets are always about having some notion of what is moral, and it was never meant to be the license to do whatever you want. It was meant to be a mandate for the common good. It's just that definition of common, who is common, kept changing, right? So in Cicero's time, very interestingly enough, it was actually only 5% of the people were considered full citizens. That is not the world we live in, where we have universal suffrage from the time we were born in as a nation, right? Since 1947, we had universal suffrage, and you have a federal democracy where every citizen does, in principle, hopefully in practice, count. So these were very different times where you have to think about what is the common good. And what struck me in putting this together was that in that sense, the free market is not just an old idea, it's also always the next new idea. Because you have to think about the free market for agriculture for our times, right? Any serious thinker on free markets did it for their times. The problem today in India is that we're not thinking about it for our times. We are actually using derivative theory from elsewhere to think about what works for us. We aren't actually looking at first principles. So if you ask people what is free markets and why we're talking about the farm laws, people just assume you're talking about deregulation, right? Or you're talking about the dismantling of the APMC. Or you're saying you should have no stock limits. Or you're saying you shouldn't have export-import restrictions, right? All of which every country in the world will always have within a certain framework. Or you shouldn't have buffer stocks, which we showed in COVID, and now across the world people are saying buffer stocks are the next big idea for global agriculture, right? It's a very old idea, which we are very confused about whether we should dismantle or not. So, I mean, we have to think about what this means for us. And within that context, I don't think there is another country in the world which is so persistently agricultural, which has such a large number of small and marginal and poor producers, equally such a large number of poor consumers, and such a heavily and complexly intermediated market where it's not just that the intermediaries have created the problems, but legitimate problems mean that intermediaries keep thriving or arriving and reproducing themselves. So we have a very particular context. We also have a country which is where agriculture is the single largest employer, right? Still, persistently, at national average, you're talking about 40-45%, but in many states, it's much more than that. We know it is the sponge. It is the sponge that takes in surplus employment, as we saw happened in COVID. It also produces more jobs than manufacturing and services by multiples, even today, right? That is something that we have to understand is our context. And within that, trying to think about where is the engine of wealth creation, how can agriculture actually produce more and drive economic growth is increasingly vital. But also we can't think of free markets without thinking about the word fair, right? So talk about free and fair elections, you're also supposed to talk about free and fair markets, right? And that's actually what makes free markets so difficult as an idea, is how you think about fairness. It's also very important to think about how we think about freedom itself. So often, in general terms, people say farmers should be free to sell anywhere, sell whenever they want, and sell to whomever they want, right? If anybody has done field work with farmers, farmers will tell you the decision on when to sell is often not in their hands. That is why you have so much distress sales. And the when to sell doesn't have anything to do with market regulation, whether they are forced to sell at a particular time. There is no law in this country that forces farmers to sell right after the harvest, right? That happens because of a series of constraints. So when farmers are larger, or they have credit, or they have the ability to hold on to their produce to wait for a longer period, they would do so. But that freedom is not produced by a free market. That freedom is produced by enabling conditions that support farmers to improve their terms of engagement in markets. Similarly, if you ask farmers, you're free to sell wherever you want. Interestingly, and Dr. Yadav and others will know a lot more, there is nothing in APMC law that ever stops a farmer from selling anywhere, because it's actually pretty impossible to license farmers, right? So farmers can sell everywhere. Actually, it's the buyers of a certain size who have to buy in regulated markets in some states, right? Not everywhere across the country, and in many places, there is no such restriction. So the state of Bihar being one, which repealed its APMC Act well before the current law, the farm law debate in 2006, years ago in 16, right? 2006. So by 16, so 2006 they repealed their act. It's now been like nearly 20 years. And a few years after the APMC Act in Bihar was repealed in 2006, we went in 2009, 10, 11 to farmers and we asked them, where do you sell? And they said, we sell in the village. And we said, do you know your mandi samitis have been repealed? And they said, no, we didn't know that they've been repealed. And we said, it was like celebrated all over the country. And they said, we've always sold in the village to traders. And so we continue to sell. And we found large corporates in Bihar buying outside, right? And we asked them, do you buy from farmers? And this large commercial corporate, multinational corporations said, on principle, we do not buy from farmers. We only buy from traders because we cannot take the transaction costs of buying from all of these huge number of farmers. So again, when we are saying something like you're free to sell to whomever you want, that is not something that is easily determined by whether you have an APMC law or you don't. It is actually other conditions that enable that kind of exchange. Similarly, in other states, right, farmers will sell to artyas. Now, anybody again who knows agricultural markets well knows that we have had historically in some areas interlinked transactions. One of the things we found most fascinating when we found farmers in Bihar selling only in the village, we thought, okay, these must be moneylenders who are lending them money. They weren't. Right? These farmers were so small, they didn't actually enter into lending relations with the buyers. These were small aggregators, literally 5, 10, 15% larger than the farmers themselves, who would aggregate and take it to the secondary market. But they were not in interlinked transactions. You will find farmers in interlinked transactions in Punjab even today, to a large extent with artyas, because as farmers are large and have large credit requirements, their need for formal and informal credit is very different. So the structure of credit markets and the structure of commodity markets are deeply interlinked. Part of the Madhya Pradesh story, which is so fascinating, was in the 1980s, which is something that most people who study agricultural markets in other states still don't believe. Under that time, Digvijay Singh was the agriculture minister. They actually abolished the Kachi Ardh, right, and brought markets under state regulation. And this was quite a remarkable feat. They tried to do it 25 years later when I was in the mandi doing research for fruits and vegetables, but didn't manage, right, to easily dislodge kachartyas, right? So the point is, when we think about what freedom is, right, if the important conditions of freedom are about when, where you sell, in the mandi, the three things that people would talk about is sahi bhav, right, like the right price, and then very important, again, all agricultural market people know this, is sahi tol, right, the right weight, which is hugely important. And actually at that time it was nagad bhuktan, which meant immediate settlement in cash. Right? Now there are a whole variety of different arrangements, part cash, part check, part digital. These things are changing as things change. But the idea of nagad wasn't cash as much as immediate settlement, so that you don't get delays on your settlement, which for farmers are hugely costly. Right? Which is one of the reasons they sell outside mandis or they sell immediately, is because they need immediate cash. So these are all these principles. To secure any one of them, fair price, fair weight, and immediate settlement, requires a huge amount, not only of regulatory oversight, but actually of the right type of investments, so that farmers actually have a chance of doing this. Investments in organizations like COSAMB and NIAM, which actually collect market intelligence and market information and provide solid benchmarks that are available for farmers physically, so that at least it's an option that you can exercise. And if you want to sell to ITC outside, or you want to sell anywhere else outside, you can, right? And in many states, we do have laws that allow it. In many states, we still don't. The critical challenge is that this is a negotiation. I remember even with the Ichopal distinction, which was in 2003-4, when you were negotiating it, fundamental concessions like why should ITC continue to pay mandi tax, right? Why should you pay mandi fees when actually you are no longer using the mandi infrastructure? These were vital concessions. These are negotiations. Now you could see it as a failure, or you could see it as the opening of a possibility in very complex markets with many stakeholders. So whenever we've actually changed practice, we have had to negotiate it with farmers, with traders, with state, with corporate capital. And I think we are now at a moment where we need to ask, what do these substantive freedoms mean for us? One of the big problems that have happened with our mandi system is that often tax revenue collection becomes more important, right, than wealth creation. And that can be a big problem. When mandis were not created as a revenue mechanism, that was colonial government, not post-colonial Indian government, right? You still do need revenue, and you need to maintain these markets, but not necessarily. Similarly, in the provision of public infrastructure, right? I actually think you don't need so much regulation if you actually invested properly in public infrastructure. Farmers not only have to sell immediately because they don't have the capital or the credit to store, they also often don't have storage mechanisms, right? And so if you want to create good storage mechanisms, these cannot be simply done saying, let's withdraw the state, right? Often what you need to have more competitive markets is better directed public investment, better directed and better conceived, contextually conceived regulation. For example, standard setting. We know, again, in terms of substantive freedoms, standardization of weights and measures is one of the ways to get a free market. We also know that in agricultural markets around the world, one of the most effective non-tariff barriers are phytosanitary regulations. We know that large corporate capital fights very hard to control standard setting across the world, which is why you do have, antitrust mechanisms, you do have an FSSAI, you do have institutions, but these institutions need to be empowered to actually be deliberative in the right places and implement well in other places. So I remember with Mr. Sharma once having this conversation about whether mandis needed to be so representative or whether they needed to be more effective in actually implementing, and at which level do you need deliberative infrastructures and institutions where people can debate their interests, and where do you need more efficient or effective implementation infrastructures. And then finally, I want to say something which I heard, it will be very interesting to hear what others say, but when I did my fieldwork, and this has happened to me repeatedly on large-scale corporate capital, and ITC is a very different company. It's got a long history in India, but we hear this at different levels from, different. This was with the discussion with a large multinational corporate who maybe he thought I didn't understand economics because I was an anthropologist. But he told me something which is fascinating. He said, Mekhala, the problem in India is not that we have too many barriers to entry. The problem for me as a large multinational trading corporation is we have too few. What did he mean? Right? What did he mean? He meant I cannot get channel command. He meant in that soybean season, an erstwhile company called Ruchi Soya was doing something. An erstwhile company called KS Oils was doing something. And it was irritating him. And he said, unless the state gives us better channel command, that is not free and competitive markets, we will always remain asset light. Okay, this is capitalism 101, right? This is not free and competitive markets. So what was interesting to me is that 100 years ago, in 1920s, if you look at the record of large-scale multinational corporations trying to enter India at that time, they said the same thing. They said the Indian bazaar does not allow us to have channel command, right? And therefore, we find this very frustrating. I think as Indians, we need to ask ourselves not if we are pro or anti corporate capital, but what is our vision for wealth creation and wealth distribution? What kind of market structures will actually allow people to accumulate and distribute? And maybe this is one of our strengths that we have allowed for a middle. We do not have the degree of corporate consolidation that many other countries with freer markets apparently have actually got. We also know that deregulation in unequal markets is often re regulation in favor of capital. So, with all of this in mind, I think this is the time for us to think about what freedom and free markets mean. And in that, I would actually say this should be the next big idea. But this time, like all of us need to put our minds to it and not think about Smith and Cicero, but think about a whole range of Indian thinkers and Indian actors today on the ground who have deep stakes in these markets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mekhala. Absolutely exquisite as expected, and I'm sure there's lots of food for thought. We'll park the questions till all the speakers have spoken, so if you have some queries, clarifications, please save them to the end. I'll now request Dr. J.S. Yadav for his views. Dr. Yadav is, as I said in the beginning, one of the veterans of agri-marketing space in India. In fact, we're very fortunate we have several. Mr. Gokul Patnaik is here, another person who did so much work while in government and after leaving government in developing the agri-marketing space. But Dr. Yadav is a class of his own because he's worked both in the private sector, he's worked closely with governments, and he works and continues to work with the much, sometimes maligned, but certainly much debated APMC. He's also been, I think, the longest serving board member of the World Union of Wholesale Markets. And I recall meeting him in that capacity 10 years ago, and I understand he's still on the board of the World Union of Wholesale Markets. So Dr. Yadav, your views, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, dignitaries and friends. I won't much of time on the background, rather, because time is limited, I would straightway move on to 4 or 5 new ideas, which I think straightway we should consider on. First of all, everyone knows agriculture marketing, APMC is now old. The reforms we have seen, 2003, 19 and all. What I would start from is what the world is doing and where do we stand in terms of reforms in wholesale markets. That's number one. Probably we have not done homework on this, where the entire world, where our competitor countries are working. Number two, are we still taking fruits and vegetable and food grain markets together, or should we separate it out? Because food grain is no more is much of our problem in terms of sale, purchase, or free market, or distribution and circulation. Rather, our problem is fruits and vegetable. Obviously, you must be aware that fruits and vegetable are almost the same in production what the food grain pulse is 330 million ton is of food grain, almost the same is fruits and vegetable. But unfortunately, out of more than 7,000 wholesale regulated markets in the country, it's very pathetic to know that even Ministry of Agriculture, sorry sir, excuse me, doesn't know how much fruits and vegetable markets today we have in the country. It's a small estimate. We know that there are approximately 800 markets, approximately. That also we have tried to work out how many markets. So one is we don't have any focus on fruits and vegetable. We don't have an investment in public infrastructure. And interestingly, one good market requires approximately 200 acres for development of good fruits and vegetable market, where food grain requires 20, 30, 50 acre of market. Investment wise, fruits and vegetable requirement is 2,000 crore for one big market, 2,000 crore. Whereas food grain market requires only say 20 to 100 or 150, including cost of land, maybe 200 or so. And obviously, you know what is the ground level condition of fruits and vegetable. We are comparative advantages, obviously much more in terms of fruits and vegetable as compared to food grain. Per acre return and income to the farmer is almost double in fruits and vegetable. Almost smaller farmers, they grow fruits and vegetable. Unfortunately, that part is not well addressed, and in my opinion that requires huge investment, and there is the idea of public investment and private investment into fruits and vegetable market. Now the issue is whether it's really viable. Government of India has also tried through 2 3 schemes. One scheme was modern terminal market, which was started around 2002 3 4, but that we could not shell. Still, I am of the opinion that yes, it's the most viable, I say, proposition, but investment could not go. Either we could not sell it properly, or the state had restriction, or state has hesitation in terms of their land grabbing or involving private people, something. But unfortunately, no model or noble beginning has been started. Recently, we have done 2 projects in the country. Probably you must have heard IHM Ganor, India International Horticulture Market Ganor. This is the largest project in the country, for which COSAMB has been the institutional supporter and the consultant advisor, and we are doing that project. That cost around 3,000 crore of government of Haryana, and 7,000 crore is the private investment. Total land is 550. 10,000 crore is the investment in one wholesale market. See the scale. And now come to the world. If you see, the world over, reforms is excessively, every country is now doing their own reforms. Our competitors, particularly, I'm not talking about Europe alone, even Chile, Brazil, those who are our competitor in fruits and vegetable. I try to concentrate my discussion only on fruits and vegetable so that it's not diluted. And these countries, their reforms is more and more investment into private investment into horticulture, into agriculture, not in production, in this. Now I'd say how to sustain it. We have done a lot of exercises, and we have found the viability, and not the market fees is the sole, rather it's deleted. We say it's ignored, deleted source of income. Market fees, there is no more income nowhere in the world except in 75% of the countries of the world. They don't have market fee system. And regulatory, we have conducted one study. Probably it's the pioneer study in the world, where the status and pattern of legislative reforms in the world with respect to APMC and wholesale market in the world. We have recently published this. In this study, we found the world over, Europe, North America, not North America, South America, Europe, and Asia. Largely these 3 continents we have prepared, and found India is the only India. Another country is South Korea, rest Indian subcontinent countries, and from South America only one Argentina. These 5 countries, they follow these regulated pattern of markets, APMC regulated pattern. Rest of the country is free from all. There is no auction, there is no registration of traders, there is no restrictions like we put through the APMC Act, and 79% of the markets, they have, what is their regulatory framework? Out of the 40 regulatory parameters, we found the mostly parameters what they follow is, number 1, packaging, another 2, traceability, third is the food safety, hygiene. These are the parameters of 79% of the markets of the world has these parameters on their regulatory framework, not the price disclosure or immediate payment, payment, retractment after auction and all. So these are the old systems of reform, the regulation, and this requires reforms immediately. So therefore, in my opinion, we should focus on reforms, but that reforms more particularly segregating from food grain pulses, more focus on fruits and vegetable and involving private. When I say private, I have certain figures, numbers. Even if you invest a 2,000 crore in one private wholesale market, for Mr. Patnaik's specific reference, because he has been working on this sector, rather he has been guiding us how to prepare innovative, creative business models for making sustainable business plans for wholesale markets. This is the only, in my opinion, this is the only sector which has the capability to ensure viability in agriculture. Nowhere you will find the scalability or sustainability. There is a problem. But this sector has. But there are certain issues which need to be addressed at the government level, like putting the condition of non-market service area and service area, putting 10% condition, 30, 40% or something. So that's one area we should focus on. And to my understanding, I think if you raise loan, there are 4 or 5 multilateral agencies, or even RIDF schemes, or it will a mixed blend of NIDA and RIDF of NABARD, and raise 70% of loan, still IRR could be 15% or so. It's not small, and that has been working. One model is Ganur, and another we are working in Hyderabad, which is very close to what is that center? Very close to famous film city, and that's also in around 300 acres. That's one. Second issue is how long we can continue to be free from or insulated from the wholesale world markets. You know, UN agenda of FAO 2030 agenda is very clear now. Its SDG target is that you have to reduce losses, bring modern infrastructure in wholesale markets, and up to 2030 their target is including food nutrition, good food, healthy food, and modern infrastructure is the target. So we, as a responsible nation, we should address that problem as well. World over, if you see the fruit and vegetable wholesale market scenario, everywhere, 73% of the, I have study and I have presentation on this, 73% of the wholesale markets of the world are viable markets. And approximately 80% are managed by private sector. 53% of the markets of the world are obviously in the public sector, but the management is largely in private sector, either joint venture or collaborative or revenue sharing or something. There are 7, 8 models which needs a option analysis, which model suits for which activity or which area or which, but that's sustainable. Public-private investment can come only and only when you segregate the infrastructure. Like we discussed this issue with the CEO of Planning Commission and Niti Aayog, Amitabh Kant, well. And he was of the opinion that let the model of rural roads and NHAI of HAM, hybrid annuity model, should be applied to wholesale markets. We said, no, sorry, because there's the trunk infrastructure requirement, which is much more, almost more than 35, 37, 8%. In the total wholesale market requirement and investment is into the trunk infrastructure. So the private investor is not responsible for free infrastructure. And if you still modernize it, say for example, making disposal of waste in wholesale market and making it conveyor-based delivery, sensor-based segregation, and then which cost even 100 crore for one project itself. So that private investment may not like to invest. So the trunk infrastructure is important. Rest, obviously, we can see so HAM as such cannot be applied, but they were insisting that HAM should be applied. And what I mean to say is the viability is not an issue. The issue is how to convince the investors. And then the government intervention. Why? Because government mindset is still the same. We are the regulator. It's the regulated trade. It's the regulated business. APMCs, how they can go without. So we have the provision in the Act. We have special market, we have MNI market of national importance in the Act available, we have already government private market allowed, we have already the direct marketing models allowed in the Act, we have already given in the Act. But main problem is execution and rules. Execution means the private investment, and rules means the government should frame the rules. So far, government has not framed the latest rules for the latest act as well. So what I mean to say is, when we frame their act, the conduct, structure, and behavior of private market has to be different than the APMC regulated, government regulated markets. And that conduct, structure, behavior needs a complete study. Unfortunately, there are least studies as well. Universities, general universities, they don't take interest. Agriculture universities also, they don't have expertise. Even the institutions also much are not involved into, they're into the functionality or functional research of the part of agriculture marketing and infrastructure. So that's needs to be. You would be very happy to see we usually get conducted unique studies in COSAMB, like what I said is. Similarly, Mrs. Krishnamurthy, you will find not less than 10 studies you will be finding. These are the premium studies in the country. How I get it? I take most of the intelligent students, Imperial College students were my intern students, and they are from Delhi but working there. Now one student coming from South Africa. So we train them and make them understand this is what is India and our conditions, this is our agriculture scenario. We cannot be as Europe markets, but how to do that, we advise them, and that can get conducted studies. And largely our studies are premier studies. So what I mean to say is, the institutions should create a lot of data and disseminate it, share it, and then we should. World scenario, as I said, China is our example, though I'm not always in favor of China, but particularly in fruits and vegetable, what single word can bring change? They brought reforms in 3 stages. In 88 to 90 was their first phase. Agriculture marketing reforms I'm talking about. 90 to 2010 there was second phase. 10 to 20 was their third phase, and 20 onwards now the fourth phase is going on. They improve the circulation. They call distribution. There's nothing like word procurement. Here our Indian approach is procurement, procurement, procurement. Their approach is distribution, distribution, circulation, distribution. Why we call so? In agriculture marketing, we use one word, the zone of influence of commodity, which has direct link with the net returns. If you confine a distribution or circulation of a commodity within block area, say X price the farmer gets, if it is increased to district plus 5%, out of state or out of district but within state again 5%, and within country excluding the transportation and other costs again 10%. So more you increase the zone of influence of the commodity, more you tend to get. Because Indian system of production is so seasonal, at one point of time, say today onion we are getting from say Bhavnagar, one starting from Alwa, now 1 or 2 more locations. After 2 months another location will come. Therefore the distribution and circulation should be our focus like China, not the procurement. Sorry. So what these small issues need to be addressed so that we also become competitive. When we say our competitive countries, what they are doing. I have another study where we have seen the world over, almost all world markets are viable, and they are investing around 47% markets of the world. They are investing further into the wholesale markets, and nowhere except I think 17-18%, which are very small markets, nowhere you will find the viability is at stake. But the issue is there are twofold issues. One, their approach is consumer-oriented approach. Our approach is farmer-centric approach. Our infrastructure is designed shooting to farmers, their infrastructure shooting to the consumer. Food safety, hygiene, they want that let the consumer be completely happy, whereas we want that our farmers should be first happy. That's number one approach. Second approach broadly is that world over, largely because that's the consumer oriented, the city governments, the municipal governments, they take over the markets. They don't have any APMC Act or APMC like agencies and distribution. Therefore, as such, we cannot follow their model, but we have to redesign, rebuild our own model, and infrastructure is very much viable. Second issue is what should be the program implementation. We have conducted a study where approximately more than population of 15 lakh, there are 38 cities in India as on date. And these cities has so much of cardinal links of fruits and vegetable distribution, because in markets there is one principle: no market works in isolation. It has very strong cardinal links. So these 38 cities, they have 70% cardinal links of the country's production. It means if you develop these 70, 38 or 50 something around, we have identified the locations. These locations will provide the service to 70% of the produce of the country in one go. And if you take, say for example, 2,000 crore, agencies, multilateral agencies, we have started dialogue like GIZ, they have agreed to finance the whole project of 1 lakh crore, approximately 1 lakh crore is the investment. What we have suggested to them is that, okay, 20% we will take it from the states because it's a state subject, and the investment, land, etc., and user has to come from state. So state should invest 20%. 40% would be the equity, but within 10 years we will take it, buy it back again. The state will buy, either state or center will buy it again. But till the time it would be the equity of GIZ, and rest would be approximately 40% would be the loan of GIZ. Our problem is that we sometimes afraid whether we would be really in a position to maintain that infrastructure or not. Therefore, the responsibility is given to them. There would be, because the confidence or technical confidence of running and making it viable with operations and management techniques of the world standard is our weakness in APMC. People, they don't know, staff, or government structure, and therefore we have involved them. This is a model we have worked on. We have discussed with the GIZ, 1 lakh investment we are proposing, and this is small idea we are working on at the moment at COSAMB. Thank you very much for patience hearing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yadav. That was such a overview of a very interesting subsector, and I think there are some very interesting suggestions you put on the table. Thanks again. I'll now invite Madan, a former ITC guru. I think a person who has seen both agriculture marketing from the depths of a private sector company, but working very closely with government, all the challenges that a private sector company faces, but a lot of innovation which happened during your watch, especially, as I said, the e-Chopal experiment. Please share your thoughts on this theme with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me into a topic which I think I've been very, very keen on. I retired 4 years ago, so I'm a little rusted. And, if I if things have changed, please update me. So besides ITC, I was also had the honor of being associated with FICCI as a co-chair and chair of the Agri Committee. And, if I look at from my perspective today, the markets are much freer than I ever thought in my life. So ummeed se zyada, because we never expected some changes to happen. But when things happen and it's good for us, then we need to do more of it. So they need to become freer and freer. And the best way to look at this is an example. We are trying to balance a number of things. What are we trying to balance very clearly? We're trying to balance food security. We're trying to balance food prices because we have a vulnerable section, as you have said. We are also trying to improve farm incomes. And we are hoping that all of these should be able to yield, get us better productivity. And that seems to be an offshoot we're trying to do. So many years ago, I was associated with potatoes, and there's a great example of Gujarat, which I keep on giving. And I think, Mekhala, if you haven't studied it, you should actually do it. So Gujarat always had less water. So what did the government do? The government kind of made sure that we had the canal which came in. Then even then it wasn't enough water. So they said we need to do micro irrigation. So drip companies were invited and the best drip companies came in. A subsidy scheme was given. Now drip needs power, so power was given, but power could not be given 24/7. It could not be given free. It was given at an 8-hour rotation. So every farmer knew for which 8 hours he would get, and he could keep on circulating. Some, once he'll get from 4 to 12, and then the next week will be 12 to 8, so that somebody stays up for 1 week once in 3 weeks. So that was one part of it, which really meant freeing up the farmer in terms of giving him at least his power and whatever which he can grow, that freedom. The second thing is the APMC didn't really exist. The fruits and vegetables was not really covered, and my example is potatoes. Now there what really happened is that we had a company which was buying and creating French fries, and they were also a company making chips. Right? Till then, MP was actually the number one. But as a result of this entire ecosystem, and the farmers being able to grow with drip irrigation, they were able to give fertilizer exactly when it was needed. Gujarat transformed from being a table potato destination to a processing potato destination. Prices which Gujarat farmers started getting was literally 50% more than other places. Productivity was 100% more than in other places. So what that mean? The farmers made more money. The companies were very happy to give that prices because they got the right varieties with the right without any problems, and were able to get a higher yield out of them because it had the right kind of a dry matter, which meant that they wanted to invest back and expand capacity. So more capacity, more production needed. Farmers get more money. Farmers are investing in buying better equipment, better, more land. Better storages are coming up per se, and the government also arranged soft financing, which also worked. Now, if you really go back and see Gujarat today, it is the home of French fries and even chips, potatoes. Farmers are making more than 1 lakh an acre. The entire ecosystem has been created, and if we could just replicate this across, and it's all done free. It's a free market in any way. The farmer actually, as you rightly said, can now store it, need not sell. He can sell part, keep one. If he has the money, he doesn't have to be forced to sell, right? So, and that's really what I think has been one of the best examples which I've seen across of. But again, the one thing which was different here was there was a demand. And because the company was value adding on the product, it was able to give the farmer a better price. Because it was getting a better quality product, it was able to give the farmer a better price. Nobody will give a better price without being able to get a higher realization for his produce. So I thought I'll share this with you per se before I move on to the other aspects. Now, I understand, when I was in FICCI, we kept on fighting for it. I think the central government always understood the need to reform agricultural markets. I think the problem really became the states where it was a source of revenue. It was the flexibility of having money to spend, political appointees, whatever be the reason, etc. But I think the states are also changing. And I think everybody wants to make that move because that is the only way India can grow totally. But the background was very clear. Background was that we got independence, we had food, we had food shortages, we had rationing, we had hoarding, and so on and so forth. So we had 2 acts which came in. The Essential Commodities Act came in 55. I think the APMC started coming in 60s and 70s, and then spread over. And both of them are still around in any case. But I'll first cover APMC. So APMC was only had one objective, literally give better infrastructure and give the farmers an ability to sell their produce. That really was the objective. Revenue generation was a way of just meeting cost, right? But over a period, it evolved and it had its shortcomings, as we all discussed per se. And it's not that there were some advantages, of course, like you said, that the RTO was also a money lender and so on and so forth. But because of these efficiencies, ITC was able to get was created an idea of the e-Chupal, which I think was under also your watch, if I'm not mistaken, when you were an MP. So you know more about it than even I do. In 2000 they started. When the e-Chupal started, it was something very new, and therefore there was a learning curve. The team in ITC learned, and it was kind of, made a couple of mistakes, learned from the mistakes. So the trading community around said that these guys won't succeed. So they stopped worrying about us. But as ITC learned and as things improved, by around 2003, 2004, they realized that now this seems to be working. And then they went back and tried to lobby to get that license of Chopal being able to buy directly from farmers removed. But that's when a very great thing happened. And the great thing was that the farmers had seen independence. They had seen the free market and they had seen that opportunity. And they came out in great strength into the streets of Bhopal. And I think that the rest was history at the end of the day. And that is how I think e-Chopal then continued to succeed. And the sheer fact that farmer now was able to get market information, he knew what the prices before he went to the mandi and so on and so forth, also meant that mandis started improving, and now there are many other people who have these same models which are currently there. But the key thing of increasing farmer income, and I want to talk about that here for the moment, is that there are certain inefficiencies which the mandi have, and those are obviously the cost associated with moving from the farmer's goods into a farmer's field to the mandi, having handling, having losses. Loss of identity becomes a very, very important thing, especially if you're looking for specific varieties and stuff like that. And obviously the 4% cost. But incidentally, Chopal always paid the 4%. That never got exempted because that I think was but the other aspects were very, very critical. For fruits and vegetables, this is a non-negotiable item literally, because in deterioration in quality in fruits and vegetables is absolutely dramatic. And even when you look at, let's say, in New Zealand, green peas are processed within 4 hours of harvesting because they start deteriorating in quality. Now, if you're able to process anything which is fresh, you get a better yield, you get a better quality, you can get better prices from consumers, and which means you can pay farmer better prices per se. So I don't think that there should be really any debate in terms of freeing up markets for horticulture produce per se. There are probably only one state which I think has interest in horticulture produce income, etc. kind of stuff. But otherwise, it has to happen, and I think it's a key element even for processing companies per se for that too. I know there are processing companies who have created an ecosystem around them, getting the right varieties, helping farmers in agriculture, which also happened incidentally with potatoes per se. And Indian yields of potatoes are actually matching anywhere in the world, and so is the quality. And this is what is going to be essential. So I don't really want to, I think, debate on horticulture is really how do you preserve, how do you reduce losses, how do you get the right varieties and quality. And I think that is the only debate to be there more than anything else. Investment, of course, you know better than I do there. The second item is I wanted to talk about was the Essential Commodities Act. With your permission, is that okay to talk about that? Because that also is, in my view, hampering free markets, right? No, I think the key is that when you look at a free market and you want, if you, the Essential Commodities Act obviously is important. It's you need to make sure that you have food security for people. And but let's see what happens at times. At this point in time, I think there is a regulation. Very recently, the ban on rice exports has been lifted. Non-basmati rice exports has been lifted. Basmati rice, I think, had a minimum export price at this point of time. Now, there are companies which have created brands. And we are talking about a company called Dawat, which is the #1 seller of basmati rice in USA. And you can find the brand across. They've also bought another brand called Royal per se. Now, when you create brands, you create, and they're also in Europe, etc. They actually have an operation there. They have commitments with different with different sellers, right? And those commitments mean that they need to be able to supply them stocks regularly. They also do full food service, restaurants. They do, they'll package for other brands per se. Now, when you start having, and they will fix a price at the beginning of the year for the next 12 months because they have bought the stocks. They're holding stocks for aging in basmati rice, at the end. Now, if you have a minimum export price, I don't know how they manage it, but it becomes extremely difficult. If they have agreed to a price of 100 and the minimum export price is now 120, what do you do? Right? It's a dilemma at the end of the day, and you put all those monies behind investing and creating that. So the good thing is that the government has been very, very appreciative of this, and therefore there is reasonable bit of consultation and things which are happening per se to work. But it does impact getting newer and newer players into this arena and actually being able to build brands for Indian produce globally. I think that is the big question. Now, companies like this could be mega food companies because they've not only they've gone to other produce also. I think they're trying to do many other items. They've got non-basmati rice itself, and there are certain non-basmati rices which I think have never been exploited out of this country because these bans keep on coming and going. But there is a variety called Gobind Bhog, which is very popular in Bengal, and that is more expensive than basmati rice. I think there's varieties in Bihar which are very, very good. There is something called Sira Samba or Jira Samba in the south, which is another very good variety. And these are, right? So these varieties could also become global brands as long as there is certainty behind it in terms of the supply chain. It's a long way, but I think these varieties also are traditional Indian varieties. And I think have great potential. I don't know whether you've ever tasted any of these, but if you haven't tasted a Gobind Bhog or some of these, you'll find them are equally delicious to a basmati more than anything else. Now, I know the ban on wheat exports, atta exports, actually also impacted the number one brand called Ashirwad, because now you can't get Ashirwad. I think even the ban still continues, if I'm not mistaken, totally. And it really means that all the efforts done in creating that brand go for a little bit of a miss. But they've managed. There is if you now find globally, what is available is the multigrain atta, which is a different, which is not as good as, let's say, from a point of view of softness, sharbati atta per se, but it works pretty well. I think the blend which has been created is actually working all right, and therefore that aspect is also something which has happened. So how do you balance, and this is a very delicate one, we don't have answers as much, but how do you balance the need for food security, prices for the vulnerable, and at the same time promoting exports of agri-commodities? Now, the one thing which has changed is that today India's agri-exports are $50 billion. That's twice as much as automobile and components, right? It's, I think, even higher than textile, or very, very close to it. Textile is very, very close to it per se. Now, if you want to get more and more value for the Indian economy, and if you want to get more and more value for the Indian consumers without impacting farmers, and I go back to the Gujarat example because productivity went up. It's not that the prices were, everybody was happy. That's the kind of a situation. Because if you make money, you will invest behind improving. You will invest behind your production, etc. kind of stuff. So I think that to me is a question, and that fine balance is all I can kind of end up saying. And we can discuss more about some of the intricacies. I can only say that from my previous experience to now, I find a much more amenable government, a much more proactive government, willing to listen and willing to make changes. So that's that's what I really had to talk about with Essential Commodities Act. I'll come back to the APMC now, and APMC with grains totally. It's very silly. You have a wheat processing, you have a factory which is producing wheat, and you want to be able to buy, producing atta, and you want to be able to buy wheat from the farmer who's around. You can't. You need to get a license for that in some states. the license has to be renewed every year, right? And then you run around and do that per se. No, you can go and buy it from the mandi. Now, again, I said it's a complete waste of economic money for anybody. I don't know whether this still exists, but definitely existed 4 years ago. And it was a sheer waste of time in our view. So why cannot mandis also be, let's say, mandis be removed from a point of view from, and it's okay. So let me say this. There's nothing to prevent you from keeping the mandis, but it's important to have create multiple alternatives. Some states have done it, and some states have done it very liberally. Some states have done it slightly grudgingly. But the whole thing is, if you create alternatives, the farmer has alternatives, and that's what you're trying to do. And when you have competition, then you get better and better, right? It's not an issue of the 4% charge. I think we can always debate whether the 4% should be levied if it's direct procurement. Today, it's levied in most places. I don't think anybody is exempting the 4%, but it's the other costs which I think become much more, and the other advantages. If the farmer has a relationship with the RTI, if the RTI is giving him good service, he can go to the mandi. If he thinks it's better to go to the company, he can go to the company, or whoever is a private buyer at the end of the day, he can also do that. And these are all my personal views, therefore not company views, because I'm very much retired.
We did say you were retired, so don't worry.
Absolutely. The most important, and one of the best examples I can give you, sugarcane. Right from the beginning, sugarcane went directly from the field to the factory. Right? I don't know why others can't. And there can be nothing better than that per se. Imagine if this is happening in other crops per se. I want to talk about one more item, which is I know. Thank you. This is to do with agricultural land. One of the other ways of, I think, which we've been talking about is freeing, let's say, agri-produce, is to make, and there is some aggregation happening with FPUs. There could be other models of aggregation. But as farmers are becoming more successful, they would like to add farms. And I'm not talking about corporate farming. I'm talking about farmer farming. Some states have 15 acres as a limitation. Some states have, well, one state has 60. Right? Now, if you are making 50,000 rupees an acre and you have 15 acres, or you are making 7.5 lakhs of rupees, right? Is that nothing? Right? You will not get bright youngsters coming in. You won't get productivity. So why can't this be made 100? This will give an opportunity of some of the marginal farmers to exit if they want to exit. If they don't want to exit, it's not compulsory at the end of the day. Let it be for farmers. But I think this is something which really needs to get debated now, and it's not for land grabbers. It is actually for agriculture. So with all the checks, balances, etc., if you can put that into place, I think that would be really very nice per se. A couple of quick comments, and there could be other models of aggregation. I think we need one more startup which will say how to aggregate farms without ownership per se. In the US you don't have mandis, you have terminal markets for fruits and vegetables, where the whole is on actually creating that infrastructure more than anything else. So my summation is that we need to protect vulnerable, and we as a country have a very large number. Fortunately, the government has created a scheme of giving free rations, which I think is working per se. But at the same time, we need to create higher productivity. We need to give more money to our farmers. We need to handle our agri-surpluses much better so that we get better realization from them when we are exporting. And I think free markets is one step, but we probably need to do a lot more, but in a balanced way. Thank you.
Thank you, Sachin. That was as expected from the depths of your insights and experience. So thanks again to the very patient audience, and it's now your turn. I'm going to open up for questions, and if you have a comment, please keep it very brief. We'd like to take as many. But before so I'm going to misuse my position as moderator and just place this fact before the House that actually before the APMC, India was the freest agriculture market in this part of the world. Every state, not just every state, had its own model. Sometimes within a state, different districts had a separate model. And it's under the advice of the World Bank that the government of India came up with the model APMC legislation and pushed the states to adopt it. And believe me that over an 8-year period, the states resisted this. Now, as a person who headed agriculture in Madhya Pradesh, I was very curious to see what Madhya Pradesh argued at that time. And I managed to dig out that old file. And there is a letter, obviously I can't carry a copy, but there's a letter which I saw written by Mr. P.C. Sethi, who was the chief minister, to Mrs. Gandhi. And of course, it's very, in a very polite tone, but he's basically telling her, respected madam, your officials sitting in Delhi are pressurizing us to adopt this, and it is completely unsuited to our needs and requirements. And then he goes into a big history of the agriculture markets systems in Madhya Pradesh, because Madhya Pradesh was basically several of the residual areas of central India that came together. So something like 6 systems prevailed. But he basically said, please don't do this. Please don't force us to adopt it. Then, of course, came the emergency, and in one shot, everybody had to adopt it. So I think the point we are perhaps discussing here is not that there should be no regulation in agriculture and agriculture markets, because the same principle is then applied to stock markets or labor markets or financial markets. I'm sure that nobody will make the case. So definitely, but I think what is coming out is perhaps the need to rethink and reimagine the kind of markets we want for the 21st century. So I'm going to stop here, and it's open to questions. Maybe we'll take 3 at a time. Yes, Anil, you'll start, and then please specify if you have a specific speaker that you wish to address. Otherwise, yeah.
My name is Anil Sant. I've been an IAS officer from Uttar Pradesh cadre. I worked in Lakhimpur Kheri, Gorakhpur, and my comment is with regard to the sugarcane production. Just now you mentioned how good it has been that they are buying directly from the farmer. I have seen a scenario in which the farmer would not get his dues for years together. 5 साल जब उसका चुनाव सर आता था, जब चुनाव होने वाला होता तभी उसका भुगतान हो पाया करता था। चुनाव से पहले लोगों को मालूम था कि 5 साल तक इंतज़ार करो, ले जा करके डाल दिया करते थे चीनी मिल में और वेट करते थे जब चुनाव आएगा तब पैसा मिलेगा। आज स्थिति हमने वो देखा है, हम लोग जब डिस्ट्रिक्ट मजिस्ट्रेट थे तो फिर आरसी की धमकी दिया करते थे, जैसे गोरखपुर में थे तब जा करके उनको आरसी की धमकी दिया करते, तब भी वो जो हवाई जहाज से तो खुद चलते थे मजिस्ट्रियर्स, लेकिन फार्मर का पैसा देने के बाद उनके पास नहीं हुआ करता था। तो एक तो ये हो गया डायरेक्टली अब उनके खाते पे आज की तारीख में आ रहा है। लखीमपुर खीरी वगैरह में आजकल घूम रहा हूँ, अब कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, फार्मर को जो पैसा मिल रहा है, और ना ही कोई दिक्कत आज की तारीख में एफसीआई से है। अभी तक तो हम लोग जाते थे और वहाँ से अब हालत ये हो गई है कि उनके यहाँ से टेलीफोन आता है आपके पास कि साहब आपके पास गेहूँ आया करता था, आज की तारीख में आ नहीं रहा है, कहाँ रह गए आप। तो ये चीज़ जो फार्मर का जो मार्केट फ्री की बात हो रही है, जो भुगतान उनके सीधे खाते में हो रहा है, शुगर केन का बहुत अच्छा एग्जाम्पल है कि हाउ इट हैज़ बीन स्ट्रीमलाइंड। जो आपने जो गुजरात के बारे में कहा है, उत्तर प्रदेश में अब धीरे धीरे ये लागू हो पाया, वही मॉडल रहा, वही सीधे सीधे उनके खाते में आ गया है। इट वॉज जस्ट अ कमेंट कि आप फ्रीडम की बात कर रहे हैं, एपीएमसी की मार्केटिंग कह रहे हैं कि सीधे खरीदने की बात है, सीधे भुगतान भी हो रहा है और वो उसके आधार कार्ड के आधार पे हो रहा है, सीधे खाते में हो रहा है, छात्रवृत्ति भी उसी तरीके से हो रही है। दिस हैज़ सॉल्व्ड अ लॉट ऑफ प्रॉब्लम। और लोग जो कुछ नहीं करते थे, पहले मनरेगा की बात होती थी, आज की तारीख में घर में बैठे हुए उनके घर में अनाज पहुंच रहा है, कुछ काम
let's keep it to the market part. I think you made a good point.
मतलब खाते में पैसा पहुंच रहा है, लोगों को पैसा मिल रहा है, farmers are very
so
happy
I think
for
basic
this
point
thing.
you're making is regulation is still required, some sort of oversight is still required. Point made. Okay, yeah, and Ajay.
So See, I don't, agriculture markets, most of the markets in the world are relatively free, agriculture markets across nations. And in no country are they fair. Like Mekhala said, freedom and fairness is different. In no country they're fair. And as a farmer, I think, in spite of the knowledge that they're not fair, we still need free markets. And free markets, like everyone's agreed, is needs regulation. Doesn't mean it's not regulated. But I just want to add 2 points. One is what I noticed on the farms is over the last few years, payments for fruits and vegetables have become more banking channel through and less cash. I don't think so it's been captured, but the maximum change in check payments or direct payments in bank accounts, not just because FCI is doing it or government is doing it, but on fruits and vegetables is going by people are like जो quinoa orchards and fruits, they're all saying check से पैसा चाहिए because check से payment हो रहा है. So that's a huge formalization of economy. I don't think so that's been that's been captured. And the other thing is, two things is, I think government officers aren't trained, and sir, IS officers ko keh raha hu, so don't mind it. IS officers haven't been, they've not experienced a systems approach. So if you want regulated free markets, you need a systems approach, and mindset change karne mein time lagega. As a farmers organization, we've suggested this to Niti Aayog, to the Agriculture Ministry, to the Finance Commission, कि आप उसमें करो 1,000 करोड़ का we are estimating is the fruits and vegetables का income that states are generating. I don't have facts. I think Siraj Hussain साहब, you will have better facts. 1,001 करोड़ की income है state governments की. So सबसे आसान तरीका है fruits and vegetables को unregulate करने का है कि वो उनको state central government को finance commission को उनको compensate कर देना चाहिए. Now that can be done through a compensation or in the finance commission का जो आएगा नेक्स्ट वाला, उसके अंदर उसको ग्रांट दे दें कि जो आप फ्रूट्स एंड वेजिटेबल्स का जो टैक्स है 0 मत करो, 0.1% कर दो, और आप एंड द कमीशन विल कंपनसेट देम फॉर द टैक्स, बिकॉज 3% 4% टैक्स फॉर अ सिट्रस ट्रक, 2-3 लाख का ट्रक, 4 लाख का ट्रक है, वो 4% के लिए पीछे वो उसको चोरी करेगा ही करेगा. So that's the point. Thank you.
मैं एक क्लैरिफिकेशन दे दूं छोटा. आपने बहुत सही कहा. इनफैक्ट हर स्टेट का अप्रॉक्सीमेटली 1,000 करोड़ ईच स्टेट मिनिमम है. फ्रूट एंड वेजिटेबल 6% ऑफ द टोटल फीस का ओनली 6% है. 6% से एवरेज ज़्यादा नहीं है. हाँ, उत्तराखंड 75% है, यूपी कम अराउंड 20 है, दिल्ली 60%.
एक 2014 में एक मुहिम चली थी. मोस्ट स्टेट्स डिड टेक इट ऑफ द regulated list.
1,000 करोड़ का क्या कह रहा हूँ कि आई एम जस्ट प्रिज्यूमिंग कि पूरे देश में जो स्टेट्स रेवेन्यू इकट्ठा कर रही हैं बाय टैक्सिंग फ्रूट्स एंड वेजिटेबल्स, दैट कैन बी कंपनसेटेड बाय द फाइनेंस कमीशन एज ग्रांट, एंड दिस व्हाट the states are then incentivized to do away with.
But actually the big daddy is the grains वाला.
वो बात ही नहीं कर रहा.
आप वहाँ से शुरू करें, हम तो शुरू.
I just wanted to make one comment. The fruits and vegetables, the reason I think fruits and vegetable needs to be 0 is because अगर कुछ भी होगा tax, there will be somebody who will stop the truck somewhere. And that's one thing which we don't want in a perishable product. So that's the only logic I have on fruits and vegetable being 0.
So I'm not going to enter into this, what should be the percentage of tax and all that. I came here basically to hear that next big idea in agriculture is free market, the next big idea. I think this Krishnamurthy completely disabused the idea that there's no such thing as free market. There has to be, different people think of free market differently, and there has to be some regulation somewhere. I think it's just like, saying that people on the roads in Delhi should be all free to do whatever they like. It'll be total chaos unless you do need traffic policemen, and therefore we do need regulations. Point is, what is the purpose and where are we going? If you look at the history, originally, if you look at the objective of the Madras Agriculture Market Act, which was the first APMC Act to be acted, objects were very simple. It was thought that the farmer is an innocent villager. He doesn't know his own rights. Therefore, to protect him from these traders who are sleek operators, you have to have a safeguard. The government should act as a safeguard. Therefore, what Mrs. Krishnamurthy was saying, that a farmer needs three things: right price, right toll, and place to sell. So these three things were provided. That was the sole objective of starting the agriculture market then. I think today the concept of market has changed drastically. It's farmer knows his rights. It's not no more a country full, and the whole market, the purpose of market is also changed. As Mr. Yadav was saying, today market is used for traceability, for for looking at hygiene factors. Sachin added even branding and marketing of different products, exports. These are all functions. So market today, I would like to say that market is a different institutions altogether. It's an institution for public good. It's an institution which creates a public public service by helping people, consumers, market, everyone. Consumers are as much a part of the market as the producers are. Therefore, having said that, now if you look at it directly, not to just to protect the farmer, but as a public good for the entire public, so we need to provide facilities. And as was very rightly said, today the infrastructure is awfully lacking. We don't have infrastructure. Look at all the, not only the regulated market, look at the hearts, the pitiable condition. So I would say that we need a lot of infusion of infrastructure to make it into what it should be. It should be a public institutions, and for that you need enough funds are not available with the government, or government funds itself will not do. You need to attract, you need to permit private investment into this and make it possible to do private investment. By private investment, I don't mean that you barter it away and allow only private people to operate. Then there'll be monopolies all over. You have to have a very strong regulatory mechanism. I would compare it with, let's say, the airports. Airports are also public, they do a public service, and people operate, and they are being operated by private people. Some of the airports are public, some of there should be a mix of public, and there should be a mix of APMC and private mandis. And there should be a strong DGCA type of regulatory authority to operate, to make sure that the rules are properly followed. I think that is the way to go. We have to totally think anew what is the purpose of market, and we have to think of it as a separate institution which serves a purpose, serves a different purpose from what 30 or 75 years ago it was thought of, and that's why I think very important to get private investment into it. They'll bring in technology, they'll bring in different skills like marketing and branding and these things, and they will have to provide them some way, give them some leeway to operate, but within strict controls, within very strict control. I think the best example is we have done this in telecommunication, we have done this in airports. Why can't we do it in markets? That's where it's needed most, and it will help maximum number of people.
So let's Mr. Sharma come in. Then yes, ma'am. I'll come to you. Yes, sir.
सर एक ऑब्जर्वेशन है, शायद रिलेवेंट लगे. सीपीआई में सीरियल इन्फ्लेशन शायद 10% के आसपास था. कल या आज ही रिलीज़ हुआ है. तो वेयर द मनी इज़ गोइंग, दैट इज़ ए क्वेश्चन. और जो घूम फिर के बात वही आ रही है कि फ्रीडम का मतलब क्या बेचना है, कहाँ बेचना है, पर किस पे बेचना है, क्या ये फ्रीडम है? आई थिंक दैट द फंडामेंटल क्वेश्चन. Can it be ensured, or can this freedom be made available to the grower?
नहीं, आप क्या लाइक, हाँ,
ये सब क्या बेचना है, कहाँ बेचना है, ये तो ठीक है.
हाँ,
किस प्राइस पे?
किस प्राइस? Correct. Okay, yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Let him then I'll come back to you. Let's just finish.
I just wanted to make one, in the comments, I think you mentioned very correctly the balance between food security, I would add nutrition security to it, because we have thought too long about food security without thinking about nutrition security. And food security and nutrition security means access as much, and affordability as well. So actually prices are part of that. There's no point talking about food security without talking about whether people can access good nutritious food as well, both in a public distribution and others. I think you mentioned farm incomes critical and agriculture as an engine. But I think one other thing for this period is agroecology. I think unless we talk about and place nature and agroecology at the heart of thinking around markets, we will get into a lot of trouble. And this is a problem that we're having across, whether it is an MSP procurement problem in certain states with what we have done, or actually the way in which the private sector has exploited. Neither markets or state is great at protecting nature without thinking about this quite critically. So I just wanted to add the agroecological aspect in there to say if we're thinking about the future, we must think about this. I just wanted to make a point about private investment. Our agricultural markets are overwhelmingly private. The state does buy in food grains, certainly, in wheat and paddy in certain states. But even wheat and paddy in many other states, and at certain times, even in the major states, are bought privately. First point. Secondly, when we say private sector, we are assuming large-scale corporate capital at the instant. Whereas today, if you think about the structure of our markets, 85% of food and agriculture production and distribution is managed by small-scale SMEs, right? Not just your thela wala, but even your mandi farms, even your millers, processors, so many of the others who are, including farmers' cooperatives, right? The Sayadri guys, all these other people, everybody now coming together. These are all, and Amul is a great example of one which grew in scale, but did not begin as large-scale corporate capital. So I don't think one of the problems we have when we imagine markets in India is we don't have a vision for the people who are actually involved in production, exchange, consumption, circulation, distribution, and consumption. And we have actually demonized them as some terrible regional capitalists, chores, middlemen, all that. I'm not saying they are wonderful people. They have all told me how much chori they've done. I've understood it in gory detail. And it's not that they are some peaceful and wonderful people, but they are actually very core parts of our society and economy, for which we actually don't have a vision for the middle. Right? In agriculture, just like we need large terminal markets, just like we also need to have mechanisms for them to participate in wealth production and distribution. The engines of our small towns will also be these small traders, medium traders, capitalists who want to be in those areas, right? And they are a mix of competitive characters. They compete. They are also quite capable of monopoly. They're quite capable of cartelization, again, why you need a certain degree of regulation. But I think somewhere when we think about this, and I think, Siraj Hussain, you had done this study on investment in agriculture with Dr. Batla, and one of the points you made was that 85% or 82 to 84% of investment in agriculture is actually by farmers. 12% of investment in agriculture is by the state. And corporate investment in agriculture actually is not, when you aggregate it, is not more than 2 to 4%. So the real private sector in Indian agriculture are farmers. They are private sector. And then there's this whole other group of very motley intermediaries who I don't think one should simply dismiss. Many of them have deep knowledge about why these markets work, how they work. They solve many local problems. And I don't know, most companies, and I think even Mr. Madan will agree, but like whenever I talk to corporates, they say the problem with them is not that they're inefficient. The problem with them is that they're hyper efficient. There's a different problem.
Yes,
so we'll stop.
Because I want you to have some last word. Yeah, no, there's the lady at the back, sir. Then I'll come to you. Yeah, please, ma'am.
for free market, I expected to hear more of this rice and wheat, where free market has a problem. So most of you are speaking on fruits and vegetables. Now, fruits and vegetables are mostly processed also, so I'm not very clear. They are two totally different things. So I think fruits and vegetables we have to divide into two. One is farmers to processors, another is fresh fruits and vegetables from farmers to the consumers. So without that distinction, I am getting little confused, even with exports and other things. Second question is, I don't know, I get an impression, I think she also spoke a little on that, whether you are thinking, I mean, sort of identifying APMC with non-free market. I'm not talking about regulations. There are many regulations which may not be necessary, but it is true. Whatever surveys we did for the government, we found farmers did complain about the traders, but they depend on the traders a lot also. In many for information, for timely money, and this and that. So the question is that, and another thing is, I have supported this quite a bit, because in the APMC market, the price is determined by auction. Now, did you think, someone reported that in that market, some contract market or something, they had a hard time deciding the price, because then they go by the APMC, whatever comes in. So, if you have a solid APMC market with auctioning procedure and all, maybe one day we'll, get over that. But till now, at least there's a benchmark price there. And similarly, how do you get the data then? Is there any protocol? I think you spoke about the computerization. So there should be some regulation or whatever, that they should also sell by money transfer, and also that the record of production prices, everything will be kept. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Yadav, you can comment on this later. Yeah, you can make a small point, then I'll take one of the youngsters.
एक मिनट साहब, मैं इजाज़त लूँगा. Actually, I have to go somewhere at 7:45. So Pravesh will continue till 8 o'clock. So before I go, I'll just make a couple of points. A very big idea was tried through the farm laws, which provided that sale outside the APMC will be permitted only on the strength of a PAN card, which means APMCs would have disappeared over a period of time. That idea did not succeed. Nobody has really spoken whether it was a good idea, bad idea, should it be repeated, because in any case, the states do have the power to do the same thing, which the center tried to do. Any state can do it, but no state has tried that. So that is one. Unfortunately, we did not spend much time on this. My second point is that we are spending, the government of India is spending about 11 lakh crores on infrastructure, railway, port, this, that, and the other. And I have written about it. I do not know, Mekhala, how much has actually been spent on infrastructure in APMCs. Because if it has been realized after the repeal of farm law that APMCs should not be allowed to die, then why is the government not investing? And sir, I do not know, at least I do not know of any APMC which has created a substantial cold chain facility. Maybe some have, but I am not aware. Through the state government funding. So we do need, Mr. Yadav spoke about horticulture, we do need substantial investment, whether through PPP or whatever. Third point is, why is it that no state is trying PPP? You do not need a central law. So if we think, people who study this subject in detail, if we think that more investment is needed, nobody is preventing any state, especially the progressive ones, to experiment with that. My fourth point is that in Maharashtra, some 60 private mandis have been set up. This is what was thought, that all the ills of APMCs will be tackled by private APMCs. So Mekhala, you please research that and write about the experience. As far as I know, they are only dealing with the specific commodities like cotton. So they have not replaced the mandis. And finally, there is so much else, but I do not think I have the time. Finally, if the regulated structure of APMCs has to continue, the finance minister announced, I think 2-3 years back, that the hearts will be modernized and so on. But as far as I know, we haven't seen any traction on that. So hearts continue to be in very rudimentary shape. So I'm very sorry, I have to go somewhere. So Pravesh will continue with the discussion, and I hope you will get time to speak, especially the young ones. Thank you very much, and we do look forward to your participation in our future events also. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, you, sir, and then I'll come to you.
Yes. My one observation or the issues whether who is getting the advantage? If we see from last 7-8 years, the food inflation is on much higher side. Now, if we relate indirectly with the increase in income of farmers, particularly lower, it is almost negligible. So where this benefit is going, in spite of all these regulations, if it is not middleman, it is not going to consumer because it is inflation. Certainly it is not going to farmer. Then where it is going?
Yes, now we'll have the next generation to crack this problem, which we have created in our generation. Thank you.
Good evening to every veteran present here. I am a civil services aspirant and having a vision of becoming like you all. So my question is, first, looking into the background, we have come a long way since LPG reforms took place, and still today agriculture is the largest employer in India. But we are still facing issues like disguised unemployment, where most of the laborers working in agriculture are having marginal productivity of 0. So in this context, with increasing globalization and simultaneous threat of climate change, how would the government of India ensure that every farmer, especially small and marginal farmers, whose numerical strength is 86%, I think, in India, so they get equal benefit and opportunities without monopoly and exploitation?
Though Government of India is not here, I must warn you, but I'm sure that some of our friends might. Yeah, yes, please.
So, hello. My question is specifically, at least the first question is specifically addressed to Mekhala ma'am. And this is based on field experience. So, I was working for quite some time, at least 2 months, in an APMC yard, Yashwantpur, in Bangalore. Now, as Sir mentioned, it's also one of those cardinal APMCs that we have. It's an urban cardinal APMC. And they have, obviously, they have commission agents, and then there is this APMC yard committee which has been set up. The problem is that what is this yard committee actually doing? Because there seems to be some form of, I don't want to use this term, but institutional inertia of sorts. Because the main process that a yard committee has to undertake is ensure that infrastructure is being complied with well, ensuring the MSP standards, etc. But at the same time, in Karnataka's case, especially for APMC yard Yashwantpur, they have this software, Rashtriya E-Market Service, REMS, which was a PPP initiative, to some extent almost like ENAMS, but they also have started this e-tendering and auctioning precursor of those, and they have experimented a lot on this. I'm just thinking about it, ki, why is this then being followed as a committee in itself? Because there is cartelization, there is an issue of licensing and the whole politics around that for the commission agents being happening. But in this process of digitization and portalization of sort, we are still lagging behind a lot on reforms for APMCs in specific. That's something I'm still questioning about, and I want to learn more on.
Are you sort of rooting for reforms, or you're saying that
I'm still confused about it
entirely?
entirely.
Fair enough. That's a fair question.
And
Mekhala
the second question,
Mekhala and then Dr.
just one more question.
Okay. Shall we deal with your first question? It's a very deep question. Might keep us the whole evening, right?
Okay.
Let her come back on that. Okay. Then if there's time, yeah. Okay, we'll take hers and then come to you. Yes, please.
So my question is for Mekhala ma'am only. Do you think free market is an end in itself, or is it a means to an end? And if it's a means to an end, what does that mean? Is it food security? Is it nutritional security? Is it, as sir mentioned, farmer welfare? or is it something else? What are we actually targeting? What is the regulation for? Is it just for the consumer, for the farmer? Who is the primary stakeholder here?
Okay.
And I also have a question for Madan sir. He was mentioning something about land sealing. So at the end of the conversation, so do you think land sealing is a problem in itself? Because we have, as he also mentioned, 85% of our farmers are small and marginal. So is land sealing actually just a shadow thing, or is it actually a problem for for farmers in general?
Okay, so we'll park two questions. Yes, then we'll come to the speaker.
Thank you. Really intense, good discussion, and especially you have researchers. You also have the industry here. So, as a farmer, I would want to just maybe string some of the points together, which is the price discovery, which is there. Then you have ecology, nature. And then there is also a whole lot in between that's happening. And now the transitioning for being a sustainable farmer, right? Now, sustainability, we've reached almost the end of our limits for adding boosters to the soil and everything. And there is only one way forward, which is to be more sustainable and reduce the inputs, right? When we talk about the price or the farmer income, it's a simple equation, which is price into produce, as in the number of tons or kgs or quintals of produce, right? That's a very simple equation there. Now, as a farmer, I would only, in some of the commodities like wheat and all, it is fixed, so I have a ceiling. And I have no incentive towards increasing.
That tells us a little bit about where you farm when you say it's
Yeah. So I have no inclination towards increasing the quality of my produce, but it's more quantity driven, right? Because I have my costs involved, I have my kids to take care of. Then there's the transitioning, there's an aspirational economy that I am, having to deal with, and at the same time wanting to go sustainable, right? Now, these are inherent conflicts which are there. Now, when it comes to increasing farmer income, can we not actually take the debate to increasing farmer profitability? And then we'll be addressing the issue of sustainability also a lot more easily here. And when I say this, I think private procurement happens, especially companies when they're procuring directly from farmers, they do check sugar content, tomato and all this. They do check certain aspects, right? As an infrastructure input to APMCs, can we not have maybe a system where we are actually pricing the produce on the nutritional value that it carries, right? Which directly corresponds to maybe having some infrastructure which checks, stuff at that time and says, okay, this is the price that you can get for this. And to reach this point, the government can have guidelines as to this is what you need to do with your soil in your farm. This is what you can do, right? To finance this transition, this can actually take you off the dependence on naphtha and urea and all of this. Whatever reduction in that happens can finance this.
Sorry,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You realize we are talking about markets here.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting all this can be engendered by the markets?
As a part of APMC mechanism, yeah, and maybe as a mandi infrastructure, incentivize.
You might like to react to that when you speak. Okay, yeah.
Okay, these are all like really, really challenging, and I think need 1 more hour kind of questions, which we don't have. So I'm going to take just very few minutes. I think, ma'am, your point was so well taken about mandis as benchmarks, right? And I think the one difference, and I think this is something that Mr. Madan and others also mentioned, we don't want to, like, it's not APMC versus private markets. It's a common framework in which you want to give farmers multiple sites of exchange which are viable, right? And there the APMC is extremely important because wherever we have found they exist and function well, they provide a benchmark price. Even ITC's first set of chopals, 45 of them, were all in A-class mandi towns. They were not in the very hard to reach towns. They were in areas where there was much more production as well as market development. So I think the point that we are not investing adequately in infrastructure and regulation, and therefore the benchmark price, I think, is an extremely important function that they play. I think the point that you're making, and REMS is one of those things that did a better job of doing digitization. ENAM, sometimes it feels like an app without a platform. And the platform of the ENAM is supposed to be the mandi system, but you're not investing in the mandi system. Right? Where will you do the transaction? In the end, you're not transacting online. There is a physical produce that has to be sold, assayed, moved, stored, and all the rest of it, for which you need to. So the way I think about it is we have to invest in back end first. And then you do the front end development, the apps, the exchange, but we haven't invested adequately in that. I think the APMC Mandi Committee's composition and its function has become very problematic. Most of them have lost, and I think Dr. Yadav was making the point about the need to invest in institutions. Many of our marketing institutions have forgotten form and function. They have actually forgotten their purpose, why they were there in the first place. And I think it's to your point about what is the purpose, right, of markets. They were always, and I completely agree with you that it's not about simple protections to farmers, although most farmers will tell you price discovery is still a challenge. Getting fair weight is still a challenge. Getting good settlement without support is still a challenge. So those basic conditions of exchange still exist, but things are much more complex. So we are actually looking at food and nutritional security. We are looking at agroecology and sustainability in any vision that we have to have of market development today. And we are looking at prosperity, not only of farmers, which is critical, but also of all of those dependent on agricultural markets, which include farmers, laborers, vendors, distributors. The number of people actually involved in agricultural markets is far greater, with the backbone being farmers and producers. So we're actually looking at wealth creation and distribution and thinking of Indian agriculture as a motor and a driver for growth, because we are still an agrarian country. And in a country like ours, with the structural transformation in the way that it is unfolding, thinking of agriculture as a welfare sector is the beginning of the end of an imagination. We cannot convert agriculture into just welfare, right? And we have to think about it in this sense. And so that's why I would say the role of markets has to be to balance all of this. And I think agroecology and sustainability is critical there. I think mandi committees in the way their composition is right now is problematic. And I think it needs imagination. I remember in MP, we had this conversation about elected versus appointed members and other elements, which I think is really important for us to. And I will make one very, very quick point about food grains, because I think, as you said, ma'am, that we've focused on fruits and vegetables, which are relatively less regulated than food grains. I think we have to have an imagination of the MSP that is not antithetical to markets, but complementary to markets. This is transitional and very difficult to do. But there have been suggestions, for example, that you can factor in externalities, right? So even your MSP can take into account agroecological conditions. And this is why, whether it comes to pulse procurement or oilseeds, we are still not self-sufficient. And we are not self-sufficient in pulses. And we had an oilseed mission where before ITC's e-chopals, there were oil-fed chopals, or like oil-fed hubs in the 1980s and 90s in Madhya Pradesh, which gave farmers options. And the whole vision was to actually increase oilseed and pulse production. And we've never given it either the scientific investment nor the market infrastructure and investment that we need to. I think it's not just a question of, so I think we have to reimagine state intervention so that it still allows genuine options. So the way we sometimes describe it is Bihar is all market, no state, or a very different type of state when it comes to markets, because they removed. Punjab is all state, no market, right? Especially when you look at something like wheat, right? we need to find that balance where even where you have support prices, and I think they have an important function to play, they do not have to be antithetical to markets. They can actually help develop markets. And there are good examples of how this can be done, taking agroecology into account. I'll stop.
Thanks, Mekhala. That's outstanding. Thank you. Dr. Yadav.
Thank you. There are a couple of new ideas within this discussion. First of all, yes, I will make it generalized. There are a few questions, one from you, also my farmer's friend, and one colleague, digitization. If you see, markups keeps on changing. With the tradition, what is the inflow conduct of produce in the market and outflow? If you see during last 20 years, it has changed drastically. The markups which used to be 10 years down the line is different as on date. Say, for example, I'm saying the inflow pattern of wholesale market. Today, in any fruit and vegetable market, you will find the share of farmers not beyond 12%. FPOs 1%. They bring the material. The pre-harvest contractors now a new trend in all fruits and vegetables. 85% of the fruits and vegetable orchards of the country are in the hands of pre-harvest contractors. They bring the material. Itinerant aggregators, sometimes they are itinerant or small contractor or transporters. They constitute 85% of fruits in the country. They bring it to the market. We name, in the name of farmers, we are blurred. We don't know who is coming. Actually, they are the ones. You ask the question, who is the culprit? Who is sharing this markups when the prices are going high? The grower share in consumer rupee nowhere in the world is more than 50%. Nowhere. I put this question 10 times in world conferences. Nowhere. We are somewhere around 30, 35, in between, sometime in different models, maybe 40 also, like in Karnataka, 1 or 2 models, Maharashtra models, but approximately is the same. Now, markups percentage is one, growing price is according to the economy growth. But the percentage should not come down. That is not happening. But the markets is changing. When the role of contract, pre-harvest contract is shifting from the farmer, this is the one issue. This is also equally important from digitization point of view. Now, a unregistered person is bringing 85% of the produce who is not known, the entity is not known, nowhere registered. How can you digitize him? The role of APMC is also very critical in this sense, how to make it digitized, B2B, B2C, how to make it. We are working on a project with Spain government now on this project. GIZ is financing this project. Until unless the inflow stakeholders are captured and the outflow stakeholders are captured, IT application cannot take place. Who are you going to control and monitor? Likewise, outflow, when the material goes out, we are thinking still with the old model that wholesalers might be sharing very big chunk or markups or something. Now it's also changed, totally changed. Now the transit traders are having maximum 20% share. Wholesalers only 50%, 15. Mashakor, which you understand it, they further transfer it to retailers, is 4% only. Vendors and retailers directly they have gone 35%. Within the market, if you see how the outflow goes into. Contractor 5%. Contractor is institutional suppliers, hotel, hospitals, catering, partners, embassies, this and that, only 5%. And Bijakwala direct consumer only 5%. So like this keeps on changing. And we don't have any registration. We know it's a regulated market, but neither outflow partners are registered nor inflow partners are registered. How to digitize them? That's the issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Excellent. Sajid, last word.
So the only way a farmer will get a higher price for something special which he does is if his material is identified and goes directly to a customer who is willing to pay for that. So companies are willing to pay for sustainable product because they sell it as a part of a sustainable chain. Companies are willing to pay for a quality. They're very happy to do that because it gives them a better efficiency. Whether it is supplied to them directly, indirectly, but if the identity gets maintained, I think that's one of the key elements. And one more reason we think we need free markets. Look at milk. Milk is bought in quality, but when it comes to an APMC, the entire product gets lost because it gets aggregated with something else. So that's really, and that's why the option needs to be created to direct procurement or something else. I think that is one. You had a comment. I think it's a question.
It was on land ceiling. Do you
Right.
think?
Okay.
Yeah.
So the land ceiling is that, look, you want farming to be profitable. You want more and more produce. Ultimately, our population is growing. We currently talk about food security. We've been extremely fortunate. So you want people to come back into farming, right? So you need to be able to increase the amount of acreage they can hold. So here the constraint is you're limiting what a farm size can be. Can you make it more economical? And a more economical, a wealthier farmer will be able to be a stronger and a freer farmer in some sense. If other people want to exit, etc., it also gives them an opportunity. Is there anything I missed?
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
If you permit me, I would like to supplement 2-3 things more. What the chairman pointed out in 2 minutes, he pointed out 5 issues. First, whether within the 4 wall of market, what 3 rules, 3 APMC Act amendments we brought was right or wrong. And I can't say wrong or right because it's a political issue, but in my opinion, yes, it was very right step. And world over, probably except in Indian subcontinent, nowhere you will find this that the market area approach goes with. So this is very close to the international market we were going. Number 2 is we have 11 lakh investment kitty. How much goes to the APMC? Almost nil because of the definition of infrastructure. Ministry of Finance has different infrastructure definition. RBI is different, NABARD is different, and therefore APMC has not been included as part of infrastructure, and therefore out of this 11 lakh, I think not even very somewhere should be around couple of thousand. That's all. PPP, why not in states? States, they don't everyone enjoys the regulation and they want to be, therefore they don't want that our regulatory power should go with, and they don't have funds also. And at the same time, there is no advisory, there is no support and hand-holding, therefore they are not coming forward, because I have been interacting with almost all states as the coordinator of COSAMB. Private markets in Maharashtra, he pointed out. This was probably I was the first person to start the private market in the country in Nasik. And Mr. Patnaik is aware, under his guidance we started working on this. You see, there is an international law. A market operator cannot participate into buying and selling because it would be conflicting of interest then. But these markets, 60 out of the 60 market, according to my general knowledge, not a scientific study we have conducted, more than 70% they are participating into buying and selling. So they are not markets. Even sometime I don't call the e-chopal also market, because market means the large number of buyers, large number of sellers, and restriction to the investor and partner to participate into buying and selling. Therefore, they don't fall into the definition of the market when they invest into this. Then RPMs, rural periodic markets, their modernization. Yes, Ministry of Rural Development prepared a charter on this. We have around 35,000 RPMs in different states. And there is a model, but neither Ministry of Rural Development has taken it, nor Ministry of Agriculture. So far, nothing has happened. But interestingly, that's the naturally made hub and spoke format. If you design that, link it with the tertiary, primary to tertiary and secondary markets, would be a good model that needs to be developed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yadav. I think the idea, yeah, absolute life and death.
Very small point. I think just to take where Sir left it on the farm laws, perhaps the way to, rather than looking back regretfully that we almost got there, I would prefer to look at it as a possible reimagining of where our markets could go. I think there were, as you well know, we were discussing it before, things like, ma'am, what you mentioned, market intelligence, right? There were no mechanisms, they were left optional. We know, I think all the IS officers on the ground dealt with the problems with the dispute resolution elements, the fact that counterparty risk elements needed deeper thought. So I think it was a direction. I think the hope would be for the future that we can step back and do what we tried to do today, which is look at our actually existing conditions. And I would like to say, I don't know, many of you are state officers in the IS, you're always union and state. I do want to make a plug for the states. I don't think they have always been the places where innovation has often happened in India. ITC and the e-Chopals were one, but before that, even, oil fed was another in Madhya Pradesh. It had its advantages and disadvantages. Things happen. But you're talking about REMS as the precursor of ENAM. The states are places we are a federal democracy. And I think we have to find transition pathways for states. But I think looking at states as always the problem. It's not untrue that regional interests are deep. Political interests are deep. They are also deep right at the top. They're deep right at the bottom. Political and regional interests will always be deep in economies of this kind. But I do want to plug that I think we have to have a vision for our markets that also takes Indian federalism seriously and thinks about integration as well as decentralization, autonomy, and coordination. So I think that I'll just place that there for the future.
Thank you.
One word on ceiling law, sir. One word, sir.
Okay.
सीलिंग में आप बता रहे प्रॉब्लम है, मेरे पास मान लीजिए 18 एकड़ की सीलिंग है, मेरा लड़का 21 साल के ऊपर होगा, उसके 18 एकड़ हो गई, 36 एकड़ हो गई, मेरे पिताजी के नाम पर 36 एकड़ हो गई, 50 के ऊपर चले गए ना, इकोनॉमिकल तो हो गया. तो सीलिंग लॉज इज नॉट रियली अ प्रॉब्लम
इन सम पार्ट्स, बट चलिए वी वॉन्ट, आपको पिछली बार आना चाहिए था लैंड पे जब बात की थी. सो द आइडिया, एज आई सेड इन द बिगिनिंग ऑफ दीज डिस्कशंस, इज नॉट टू कम टू सम कंक्लूजन और कम आउट विद अ स्टेटमेंट. आई थिंक the richness of this discussion is evidence of the amount of thought which is still going into this sector. The challenge is, how do we bring some very, very insightful and original ideas into the public policy discussion debate? Before I close, I repeat this mantra. I think those who were here earlier may have suffered it. Please indulge me for a minute. We are speaking in the context of what I call this four-pronged challenge that agriculture is facing. The investment crisis, we've referred to it in so many comments. Both public and private investment, which is linked to public investment, is falling. We have a factor crisis. All our major units of production, whether it's soil, water, and the other abiotic structures, they are collapsing. They're actually in some parts of the country virtually on the verge of desertification. Third, we have a huge technology crisis. Most of our major crops are facing a plateaued productivity, and we do not have any pipeline technologies which can show us the way forward. She mentioned oilseeds and pulses. We are 10 billion each bill for each of these, every year. And lastly, which is to me the biggest challenge which agriculture faces, which is the HR crisis. The young do not want to step onto the field. We have an aging cohort in agriculture. People talk about China aging or Japan aging. We have a serious aging problem in our agriculture. And this is the sector which, after COVID, has absorbed an additional 7 crore laborers. 7 crore people lost jobs in the cities, went back and got absorbed. Basically, they're underemployed. And of course, climate crisis has come as the icing on this cake. So this is the context in which we envisage this series. And as in the past 2 events, we've had the benefit of your presence and some very, very insightful and thoughtful comments. We will continue this next month and hopefully well into the next year. We have a very large list of subjects. Several people have written to us suggesting more topics, and we hope to be back again in December to continue the next big idea in agriculture series. Thank you so much to our wonderful speakers, Mekhala, Dr. Yadav, Sachin, a big hand for them. And to this very engaged audience, thank you so much for your presence and your comments and questions. Good night. Thank you.